There were 17 candles on the table. That's what I remember most. 17 little tea lights flickering in a row, part of some dumb romantic theme Brenna insisted on. The waitress even asked if it was our anniversary. Brenna laughed and said, "Oh, God, no." She said it like the idea was offensive. I kept counting the candles because I was trying not to react. My face was hot. My hands were shaking under the table. I hadn't even opened the menu yet. She had. She was flipping through it like she hadn't just slammed a mental sledgehammer through my chest. We weren't even supposed to be out. She told me she was working late. I only found out because her sister accidentally let it slip in a group text, said, "Have fun at that bougie place on 5th. I asked Brenna about it. She told me, "Fine, come if you want, but don't make it weird." So I came, and I shouldn't have. She dressed like she was trying to impress someone. Not me. I've seen her wear sweats on our anniversary. But tonight, hair done, smoky eyeliner, that deep green dress that usually stays in the back of the closet. I knew. Somewhere deep down, I already knew. But I sat there anyway, like a fool, trying to pretend the 17 candles were for us. Then she said it, right after taking a sip of her white wine and texting under the table. She didn't even look up when she said it. If you'd just be more exciting, I wouldn't need to do this. Do what? She didn't say. I didn't ask. I just stood up, chair screeching, my pulse pounding, napkin hitting the floor, people turning to stare. She didn't care. She didn't even blink. And I left. But here's the thing. Walking out was supposed to be the end of the humiliation. It wasn't. It was just the beginning of a maze I didn't know I was already trapped inside, one she'd been building for months behind my back, with people I thought I could trust, with lies stacked so high I couldn't see the top. And at the center of it all wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the guest room, which was already starting to feel like my room lately, listening to the distant sound of her laughing from the living room. At 12:41 a.m., she was still out there, on the couch, phone glowing in the dark, cackling like she was watching a comedy show. But I knew that laugh. It wasn't the one she gave to sitcoms or dumb TikToks. It was the one she used when she was trying to impress someone, or seduce them. I stared at the ceiling, fists clenched under the blanket, heart pounding with a kind of anxiety I couldn't explain. Was I being paranoid? She hadn't technically said she was cheating, but what else could she have meant? If you were more exciting, I wouldn't need to do this. What even was this? I tried to convince myself it was a bad joke. I'd made it weird. I was overreacting. I always do. That's what she tells me. At 1:03 a.m., I finally walked to the living room. Not to confront her, but just to see. Just to look. And of course, she was gone. The couch was empty. Her purse wasn't by the door. No shoes. No car in the driveway. Not even a text. No goodbye. No, "I'll be back soon." No excuse. She disappeared. I stood in the dark, barefoot on the cold tile, staring at the place where she'd been 10 minutes ago. I swear, I felt something collapse inside me. Not dramatically, just this quiet little internal snap. Like a wire breaking. Not the last one, either. By the time the sun came up, I still hadn't slept. She got home at 6:12 a.m. I heard the door click, and I didn't say anything. I didn't even pretend to be asleep. I just watched her walk past the guest room, heels in hand, hair messed up, makeup smudged like she'd tried wiping it off in the car mirror. She didn't look surprised to see me awake. She just whispered, "Don't start," and shut the door to our bedroom. And I didn't start. Not out loud. But inside, something else had already begun. Something that would eventually lead me to a strange location on a Tuesday night. A folder full of surveillance photos, a lie about a conference in Boise, and a discovery that would make me question whether my entire marriage was built on a dare. This was no accident. Brenna was preparing for something, and I was the last one to know. It's almost funny how long I convinced myself I was just being insecure. That word, insecure, she weaponized it like a scalpel. Anytime I questioned her strange behavior, her coldness, her absence, it was, "You're overthinking again," or "God, why are you so insecure lately?" She didn't scream or slam doors. No, Brenna was subtle. She'd just raise an eyebrow, laugh like I was pathetic, and leave the room like the conversation wasn't worth her breath. And every time, I let it work. I backed off. I told myself maybe I was paranoid. Maybe I was the problem. Until the day I checked the dashcam. I know, it sounds ridiculous. Who checks their wife's dashcam footage? But I'd just gotten my oil changed, and while I was cleaning out the glove box, I noticed the SD card was full. Curiosity isn't noble. I wasn't trying to catch her in anything. I just needed something to feel normal. Something to make me stop spiraling. What I found made my blood run cold. The last recorded trip wasn't to work like she said. It wasn't even close. It showed her pulling into a private community in the north part of town. One of those quiet, expensive neighborhoods with big stone gates and four-car garages. She sat in her car for a while, adjusting her makeup in the mirror. Then, right before she got out, she reached into the passenger seat and grabbed a pair of men's sunglasses. They weren't mine. I paused the footage there. Just stared at the frozen frame of her smiling at her own reflection, holding some stranger's sunglasses like they were familiar. I didn't confront her. I didn't storm into the bedroom or throw her phone across the room. Instead, I did something I never thought I would. I took a sick day, told my boss I'd caught the flu, and I followed her. I waited until she left for yoga. Yoga, really? She barely liked stretching, and then I stayed 3 cars behind, heart pounding like I was a criminal. She didn't notice. She was too busy texting someone, smiling into the screen like it was the love of her life. She didn't go north this time. She went west, pulled into a strip mall parking lot. I thought, maybe this is nothing. Maybe she's actually going to yoga for once. But no, she didn't enter the gym. She walked across the lot and into a quiet little bookstore, one I'd never even heard of. And a minute later, he showed up. Tall, tan, older, wearing the same sunglasses she'd picked up in the car. She didn't just hug him. She collapsed into him. You know how someone hugs their person? Like their home? That's how she hugged him. And that's when I realized I didn't just lose my wife. I lost her a long time ago. I'd just been too blind, or too loyal, to notice. I didn't go home after seeing them. I couldn't. I parked behind a Walgreens and just sat there with the engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. My mind was racing, heart pounding in this weird, hollow rhythm. I kept replaying it. Her face, her laugh, the way she brushed something off his shoulder like they were in the middle of some private inside joke. She'd done that with me once. I hadn't seen her laugh like that in years. And the worst part? I didn't even feel angry yet. Just stupid, like the kind of pathetic you don't come back from. I gave her everything. I believed every excuse, every fake smile, every condescending, "you worry too much." And she was just out here, living a second life like I was the boring character in her background. I finally drove home when it got dark, and when I walked through the door, Brenna was already there. In pajamas, watching a documentary on the couch like she hadn't just spent the afternoon wrapped around some guy in a used bookstore. She looked at me and said, "Oh hey, how was your day?" That was it. Like she didn't know I'd been behind her for 2 hours watching her cheat in real time. Like I hadn't seen the way she touched him. I didn't say anything. I just walked past her, into the kitchen, and poured myself a drink I didn't even want. My hands were shaking so badly I spilled some on the counter. She didn't look up. She didn't care. Later that night, when she was asleep, I made a copy of the dashcam footage. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Maddie. Maddie is Brenna's old college friend. Used to be her closest confidant. But a few years ago, they had a falling out. Brenna told me Maddie got weirdly jealous, accused her of being manipulative, and then disappeared. I believed Brenna. Of course I did. She always knows how to spin a story. But now I wasn't so sure. When Maddie answered, she was cautious, hesitant. But when I told her who I was and said I had questions about Brenna, real ones, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Are you finally ready to know who you married?" That sentence changed everything. We agreed to meet the next day. She told me to bring proof. And I did. The next 24 hours would detonate everything I thought I knew about my wife. Maddie chose a diner on the edge of town, the kind of place with faded booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked since the 90s. I got there early and sat facing the door, nerves crawling under my skin. When she finally walked in, she looked older than I remembered, not in a bad way, just tired. Like someone who'd stopped trying to fix things no one else wanted to admit were broken. She slid into the booth across from me and said, "So you finally saw it, huh?" I didn't ask how she knew. I just nodded and handed her the USB drive with the dashcam footage. She didn't even plug it in, just stared at it, then pushed it back toward me like she didn't need to see what she already knew. "You think this started recently," she said, voice low. "But Brenna's been doing this since before you married her." I laughed, bitter, awkward. You're telling me she was cheating on me while she was picking out centerpieces? Maddie didn't laugh back. She just looked at me with pity and said, not just cheating, testing you. And that's when the Rayall story started. According to Maddie, Brenna had this thing she did with every guy she dated seriously, a game. She called it control points. Maddie said it started in college. Brenna would pick some tiny boundary, like deleting a friend from social media, or skipping a family event, or lying about something small, just to see if the guy would push back. If he didn't, she'd log it mentally as a control point. Another step closer to full emotional leverage. She bragged about it, apparently. Said relationships weren't about love, they were about leverage. The one who loves less wins, she'd say. By the time I proposed, she'd already clocked dozens of these wins. Maddie said Brenna called me a soft-hearted project. Said I was useful, predictable, safe, someone she could mold without worrying about fallout. My hands were clenched under the table. My mouth was dry. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell Maddie she was exaggerating, that Brenna loved me, even if it got messed up later. But then Maddie pulled out her phone and showed me something that erased any doubt. Photos, screenshots, texts from Brenna years ago during our engagement, joking about how many control points she'd hit, bragging about getting me to cancel a job interview in another state because she didn't feel like relocating, laughing about how I skipped my brother's bachelor party because she said she needed quality time. I sat there, staring at that phone screen, feeling like my entire past was being rewritten in real time. I thought I married a complicated woman. Turns out I married a strategist. I left the diner in silence, the USB drive still in my pocket, but now it felt like dead weight. My stomach turned the whole drive home. I didn't even go inside. I parked across the street and just watched the house. Lights were on. Her silhouette passed by the window, holding a wine glass like she hadn't just hollowed out my entire sense of reality. She wasn't just cheating. She'd been engineering my obedience for years. And now I had to decide if I was finally ready to stop being her loyal puppet, or if I'd keep pretending I didn't already know how this story ends. I didn't sleep that night either. I just sat in my car watching our house, watching her move around inside like everything was normal, like she hadn't spent the last 6 years of our marriage turning me into a controlled experiment. I was still holding Maddie's phone in my lap. I'd taken photos of the screenshots with my own phone, just in case I needed proof later, which I would. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew this. I was done being Brenna's soft-hearted project, done being her puppet. If she was going to treat this marriage like a game, then fine. Let's play. I waited until noon the next day. I acted normal, or as normal as I could. I made coffee, kissed her cheek, asked about her sleep. She gave me this distant smile, like she was already halfway somewhere else. She didn't notice how closely I was watching her. She didn't notice me glance at the keys in her purse. She didn't notice me grab the spare key to her car when I went to take out the trash. By 3 p.m., she was gone again. Yoga again, apparently. I waited 15 minutes, then drove straight to her secret neighborhood, the one I'd seen on the dashcam. I had no idea what I'd find. I didn't even know which house. But I figured if I just drove slowly enough, maybe something would click. It did. Her car, parked neatly in a driveway 3 blocks in, next to a dark gray Audi I didn't recognize. The house was modern, expensive, the kind you don't get without money or inheritance. I parked down the street and walked the sidewalk, heart pounding so hard it felt like my ribs would crack. I wasn't sure what I expected. I just needed confirmation. And I got it. Through the half-open blinds, I saw them. She was standing in the kitchen, barefoot, drinking something from a wine glass. He was behind her, shirtless. He kissed her neck, and she didn't even flinch. She looked at home, like she belonged there. Like this wasn't some fling, but something established. Routine. I watched long enough to burn the image into my brain, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to stop lying to myself. I went back to the car and sat in the driver's seat shaking. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was hollow, numb. But somehow, inside that numbness, something sharp started forming. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to confront. I was going to do exactly what she never expected me to do, plan something smarter. By the next morning, I had her laptop in my hands. She never changed the password. That was her one flaw, arrogance. She always assumed I was too soft to snoop, too insecure to investigate. But now, She'd left it open on the kitchen counter while showering. I sat down and opened her email. And what I found? She was planning to move out. There was a whole thread between her and a realtor with listings and mortgage pre-approval forms. She'd already picked a neighborhood. She was going to leave me. Quietly, suddenly. And she wasn't planning to tell me until the papers were signed. She didn't just cheat. She was trying to disappear. I took screenshots. Every email. Every file. I even found a document titled Separation Strategy, where she outlined what she'd tell our friends, her parents, even mine. And in that file, there was a section titled Avoiding Guilt, Talking Points. She had talking points. Talking points. For how to leave me without looking like the villain. I stared at the screen, jaw locked, and realized this wasn't just betrayal. This was a premeditated emotional heist. She'd been planning it like a corporate exit. And I was just collateral. But not anymore. She thought she was the strategist. She was about to find out how dangerous I could be once I stopped playing nice. The thing about revenge is, everyone assumes it's loud. Screaming matches, slammed doors, burned clothes on the lawn. But that's not how real revenge works. Not when you've been humiliated slowly, methodically, and professionally by someone you trusted with your soul. Real revenge is silent, strategic, just like she taught me. I spent the next 2 weeks building my exit. Quietly. While she thought I was spiraling, I was preparing. While she whispered to realtors and snuck off for midday rendezvous with a man whose name I still didn't know, I was meeting with a lawyer, someone Maddie referred me to. Someone who specialized in asset protection and legal separation. Turns out, Brenna had made one critical mistake. The house was in my name. Solely. And she'd never bothered to correct it. Why would she? I was the predictable one, right? I also combed through our finances, found accounts I didn't know existed. Found out she was quietly transferring money from our joint savings into a consulting fund under a fake business name. I traced the wire transfers. She used the same password for everything, of course. She'd named the fake business after a poetry quote. Disgusting. I let her keep doing it. Every transaction she made, I logged. Every lie she told, I documented. And then came the final piece. I waited until she was away for one of her wellness retreats, which I now knew meant a weekend at his house. According to her location data, she never even left the city. While she was gone, I packed. Not my things. Hers. I took every article of clothing, every book, every scented candle she insisted made the house smell like emotional healing, and I boxed them up. I stacked everything in the garage, changed the locks, called the locksmith the moment she left, installed security cameras with remote access, and then I set the trap. On Monday, I left her a note on the kitchen counter. Just 3 words. This version's over. She wouldn't understand at first, but she would. By the time she got home that night, the locks wouldn't turn. Her keys were useless. Her garage opener had been deactivated, and all her belongings were lined up in labeled boxes, organized by room, like I was doing her one final favor. When she banged on the door, I didn't answer. When she screamed my name, I didn't move. When she threatened to call the police, I pulled up the deed on my phone and smiled. She tried texting, calling, begging, then yelling, then silence. She didn't know what to do with silence. She'd always counted on my noise, my emotions, my reactions, my confusion. But now I had none of it left. She'd trained me to be numb. And that numbness is what finally gave me the clarity to walk away while she stood there, alone, staring at a version of her life she could no longer control. But I wasn't done. There was still one more card to play, and it would hurt her more than any locked door ever could. I didn't respond to her messages for 3 days. Not when she sent crying voice notes. Not when she tried apologizing. Not even when she offered to talk like adults. It was all noise. The same kind of performance she'd perfected over the years. Tailored tears, rehearsed regret, strategic softness designed to make me fold. But I'd already folded too many times. This time, I'd flipped the board. Instead, I sent one email. Subject line, for transparency. Body. I forwarded the relevant documentation to your parents, your employer, your sister, and your former therapist, the one you secretly dated in 2022? Yes, I know. If you want to continue pretending, be my guest. I won't. I attached the screenshots, the emails, the fake business trail. Everything. I don't know what hit her harder, the financial exposure, or the fact that I'd finally figured it all out on my own. That I had outmaneuvered her using her own methods. that I was no longer the soft-hearted project she could mold. I was done playing a role in her twisted script. She didn't reply. Not that day. Not the next. Instead, her sister called me. And for the first time ever, she apologized. She said, "We all saw pieces, but you were the one who took it full force. I'm so sorry we let you carry that alone." Then something even stranger happened. I started sleeping. Like, actually sleeping. No night terrors. No 3 a.m. panic spirals. Just rest. Deep, dreamless sleep. My chest didn't feel like it was collapsing every time I walked into the kitchen. I could breathe again. Think again. I started going on morning walks without feeling watched. I changed the furniture around. Bought new sheets. Donated her leftover, emotional healing candles to a local women's shelter. The irony made me laugh. Maddie came by a few weeks later, just to check in. We sat on the porch, drinking tea, and she asked me something I didn't expect. "Do you think you'll ever trust again?" I thought about it. Honestly. Carefully. And then I said, "Yeah, but next time, I won't ignore my gut to keep someone else comfortable. Next time, I won't mistake manipulation for mystery. Next time, I'll love with my eyes open." She nodded and smiled. And for the first time in years, I smiled too. Not because I was pretending, not because I was trying to fix something that never wanted to be fixed. I smiled because I was finally free. And no one would ever get to rewrite my story again.